Here in the United Kingdom, politics reigns king, let me tell you. I cover politics for all major channels around the world, and Boris Johnson, our current British Prime Minister, is, shall we say it right now, rather beleaguered. It seems to be one disaster after another. Of course, he took power with an 80-seat majority, and then, of course, sadly for him, after getting Brexit pushed forward, the pandemic struck. And the world changed, not just our world here in the United Kingdom, but around the world. Everything changed. Some say, of course, for the worst. Now, whatever's happened, it's very difficult, isn't it, when you're a British Prime Minister, to step forward and find positives when you seemingly battered at every corner. The reason why I'm telling you this story is because very recently, the British Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson, stood up in Parliament to give a very moving speech of thanks to our reigning monarch of 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II. Now, it has been said by a very close source, let me tell you, that the Queen thoroughly enjoys her time, her weekly meetings, which normally take place out at Windsor, or when she was living in Buckingham Palace, of course, with the current British Prime Minister. She finds Boris sort of engaging, lively and enthusiastic. Now, as we know, she didn't necessarily get on with all of her prime ministers. The story goes, of course, that she really struggled to get on with Margaret Thatcher when she was Queen Bee at number 10. But I'm not so sure about that. You know, I do kind of think it's a good story, isn't it, to pitch two very powerful women together. And my sources tell me that eventually, you know, the ice thawed, and they both had very similar qualities, you know, very determined, and of course saw things through to the end, as we now know with our gracious Majesty the Queen. But back to Boris, that speech that he gave in the Houses of Parliament thanking Her Majesty for such devoted service, and of course more importantly for everything she's done for our country, for the Commonwealth, and as he pointed out, for the world, really apparently touched at her heartstrings. So much so that in a very rare move, she decided to reach out to him and thank him, which is really nice. And when I say a rare move, she thanks everybody. But of course, we saw that she was very moved by what he said. Now, I do like to point these stories out to people because when you're dealing with politicians on a one-to-one basis, as I do on a regular basis, you know, they're incredibly ruthless, power-hungry, and of course want to take on the world. But there truly is one woman that shrinks even the biggest men down to size, and that is Her Majesty the Queen. I remember meeting one particular British Prime Minister who told me that he'd been in power quite a few years, but the weekly meetings when he was taken through the door still made his tummy turn. Not because she was difficult or demanding, but simply because she was such a powerful icon that everybody knew, and he couldn't quite get over the fact that there he was, sitting in front of Her Majesty the Queen, explaining the week in politics. As for Boris, I'm told, and get this, the Queen sees elements of the late and wonderful Winston Churchill in Boris Johnson herself. And what's also interesting is Winston Churchill was one of her favourite prime ministers. And you've guessed it, one of the heroes of Boris Johnson is also none other than Winston Churchill. So much so, Boris wrote a best-selling book all about his hero. So isn't it nice on this Platinum Jubilee week to be able to share the niceties of politics from someone who truly has seen it all over 70 years. When you think of all the famous international leaders, prime ministers, dignitaries, presidents that she has met, it's truly nice to hear from someone who genuinely sees her on a weekly basis, or at least speaks to her via the telephone, just what a nice, warm, caring human being our gracious Majesty the Queen is. And whatever battles Boris has got right now at number 10, I'm sure he's grateful at least for the support in our glorious monarch. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.